Everyone, thank you very much for joining techUK's Early Tech Career Network networking event. This is the first one that we've hosted in a virtual setting. We've previously hosted events in person where we'll be talking about different kinds of tech topics over pizza and some beer. So thank you very much for being a part of this, and hopefully we can make this an interesting event for you. Now, today we're going to be discussing defense and security, and we've got a fantastic line of speakers today. We've got Phil Latham, DXC's Account Chief Technologist, Marissa Bracken, Portfolio Director at Mastech, and Steve Latcham, Executive Director at Mastech. We're going to talk to you about all of these fantastic initiatives going on in their organizations around defense and security. The main purpose of this event is to really provide an introduction to an area of tech that you may either work in or have heard about but are unclear about. I've worked in the tech industry adjacent for a while now, and every time we run this event, it's a new topic such as AI, Internet of Things, cloud, cybersecurity, and I'm always learning new things, and I think that's what we're really here to do. We're also here to learn from the speakers and hear a little bit about their career progressions. And after the speakers have presented, we will be doing some questions and answers, and then we'll break out into rooms so we can do parts of the networking. Just to let you know, we also have a LinkedIn page that you can join if you're interested. It's the Early Tech Career Network. I'll drop the link in the chat function, and please do interact with the other attendees and speakers through the chat function, and we'll make sure that your questions are heard before we get to the Q&A part. So if I could please bring in Phil to begin discussing the first topic.
Are you going to share my slides for me, or do you want me to share them?
They're sharing right now.
Okay, cool. So you'll change them, or do I need to change them as we go forward?
It's okay. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, fantastic. Right, that's great. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to this Early Tech Career Network. As has been said, my name's Phil Latham. I'm an Account Chief Technologist with DXC, which is probably generating enough questions in its own right in terms of what that role is and what I do. So I'm going to try and explain that as part of my talk this afternoon. And I'm going to try and just I guess tell my story of how I got from kind of coming out of university to being where I am today as the Account Chief Technologist on our Ministry of Defence account. So next slide, please. First point, I think, who is DXC Technology? Well, some of you may have heard about DXC Technology, some of you may not. Clearly from the numbers across the top of the picture, we're a large IT services company, operate globally, have a significant presence in the UK and in the public sector arena, working in the defence sector globally, working with the Ministry of Defence in the US, across Europe and in the UK. What do we do? Well, you can see some of that on the left-hand side of this fairly public slide, really. We try and help empower workforces with modern IT. We try and help businesses achieve better performance outcomes, improve their competitiveness, improve their customer experience. And we try and do that through kind of data-driven operations, enabled by a set of products or offerings that we go to market with that you'll probably be familiar with, around modern workplace, IT outsourcing, cloud platform and security, applications, and then analytics and engineering. And we refer to that in the center as the stack. And we're a well-recognized corporation globally. And at the bottom, you can see some success stories. And you might be looking for the defense reference. Well, it's definitely there. Yeah, Saab Group, one of our key clients, where we've done some great work on digital workplace to support Saab collaborate better going forwards. Next slide, please. So what's the role? There's some words I've called out from some of the decks that I found internally in DXC about the role, and there's some words there around being a senior role, about examining and explaining how technology can be utilized to meet business needs, and being a trusted advisor for clients, partners, employees, and DXC executives. That really means what I find I tend to do on a day-to-day basis is try and connect the dots between what our customers want to do, client requirements, and what we DXC have in the kit bag in terms of offerings, products, and what our partners have, whether that be Microsoft, AWS, Google, and many others. So really a connector role, but also there to kind of drive innovation and innovation thinking into our clients. So what's my story? How did I get to where I am today? Next slide, please. And actually, Nimi, if you want to build this slide out completely, it's probably easier for me to talk to the whole lot as we go. So I'm going to do this quite quickly because it's a quick story, but it's a story that I guess is quite an old story, i.e. it started in 1988, and I'm going to call out doing a degree at the University of Huddersfield in information technology, including software development, coding in C, as kind of what started me into the industry. And how did that get me started? Well, one, it was a degree that I was interested in. Secondly, it gave me the opportunity to go and work for Rank Xerox in an industrial placement way. So I did some work with Xerox. They sponsored me through my final year, and then I landed a job with them after my degree. So that's why I landed in kind of an engineering type company. They made stuff. But then if you look along the bottom of that, that's my story of who I've actually worked for over the period of time. And it's an interesting story. Yeah, I was outsourced as part of a global IT outsourcing contract to EDS. EDS rebranded. EDS was acquired by HP. The EDS part of HP was then integrated and spun out into Hewlett Packard Enterprise Services, and later was merged with a company called CSC to create DXC Technology, which is where I land today. And that's interesting in that that's kind of the companies that I work for, albeit same contract, different badge for the years since I started there. Now, what's more interesting, I think, is the work that I've been able to do throughout that career. And that's called out by the companies referenced at the top of this picture. Now, engineering with Rank Xerox, where I was part of their apps infrastructure modernization team, did some work within EDS to understand how we could do workplace transformation, including building kind of one of the first global exchange messaging networks, as well as helping with offering development. Started to work in the public sector space, doing some work with Department for Work and Pensions as they were reshaping a number of contracts really focused around apps hosting, transformation, modernization. Worked with BP through a really tough time. Many of you will recall the disaster in the Gulf of Mexico a number of years back, which really changed the way BP had to act in terms of the penalties, the fines, the impact that they made through that era, and worked with them through a significant time of change, optimizing their IT services. None of that really defense related. So really, I got involved in the defense sector when I started working with our Rolls-Royce account. Rolls-Royce, very leading British company, number of different sectors around delivering both civil aerospace, power systems, as in diesel engines, and then also their work with submarines. So started to work closely with Rolls-Royce on what they do in the defence sector, including some interesting projects looking at how Rolls-Royce was supporting the British Navy with some data analytics. And then last but not least, I've landed at our Ministry of Defence account, which has been an account for kind of EDS, HP, DXC for many years, a history working with a number of different partners, some of who may be on the call as part of what was known as the Atlas Consortium. And I've done work there now on modernising their workplace. But really interesting, I think, is the timing of being the account chief technologist on our Ministry of Defence account. Those of you following the press will have seen recently the integrated review, followed by the Defence Command paper, followed by the Defence Industrial Strategy. Really, some really interesting programs that are being kicked off and accelerated now, including the Tempest program around next generation aircraft, around enhanced electronic warfare, and around the Future Command Force. And importantly, what my job is to do now is to work out the IT response to that. What is our IT response to the investment in a cyber force? What is our IT response in response to supporting how the integrated domains of air, maritime, and land will now operate? And how do we support that through the work we do on digital backbone? Significant investment and a significant amount of work for us to do in this industry, noting a spend, I think, predicted of £185 billion over 4 years, with R&D of around £6 billion. So a great opportunity for us to help the defence sector transform. Next slide, please. So as I was thinking through what to talk about today, I kind of had a quick scan through my phone to find some photos and pick these four. The one on the left is Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier. It was docked in Liverpool, probably beginning of March last year, just before lockdown. And I went to see it. Those of you that are observant will see there's an aircraft on the wall behind me, which kind of demonstrates, I guess, some of my personal interest in this area. An impressive bit of kit, and connected with the work I was doing at Rolls-Royce through the engines that are on that ship. Also, a picture of the RS Sir David Attenborough being built locally to me at Camelot Shipyard, again with Rolls-Royce engines in. But I think those two pictures kind of demonstrate my passion for engineering, which again has been evidenced, I think, through some support I've done on the pictures on the right, which show my work with STEM. So I think, as well as doing the day job of kind of driving IT transformation in support of our defence industry, really keen to support some of the work that's done by STEM organisations, whether that's through Engineering Your Future, working with kind of A-level school kids on trying to get them interested in engineering, whether it's through some of the Lego competitions with Tomorrow's Engineer Robotics Challenge, or whether it's through doing mentoring with some of the early career workers within our own organisation. So what have I learned through that? So next slide, please. What we do in support of defence is important. We must take it seriously. Clearly, the security of the nation is really important. It's a complex landscape. There are people operating in relatively safe environments like offices to dangerous environments out in the battlefield and all places in between. When things don't work, they have a big impact. So we have to take it seriously. We have to take the information we have seriously and protect it. So we just always keep that in mind, that it's the work we do with the defence sector is a serious business. Next slide, please. How do we try and be successful? This is some advice a colleague of mine gave me. So to be half a page ahead, stay half a page ahead, and spot who is currently half a page ahead and has stopped reading. Yeah, really, in some areas, to be successful as an individual or as a team, you don't need to be the expert. Yeah, you just need to know a bit more, and you need to maintain that knowledge at that level going forwards. So keep that in mind. So always be ahead, try and stay ahead, and then spot who's stopped, and then work out how you can either help them or make yourself successful on the back of that. We know everything. I guess we see the announcements this week on the integrated review. Yeah, you'll find if you read those, you understand those, that gets you well more than half a page ahead. Next slide, please. So accept new and challenging opportunities that force you to step out of your comfort zone. Yeah, I'm the account chief technologist on the Ministry of Defence account. Yeah, how much do I know about the Ministry of Defence? I think I know enough to the point before, about half a page. But when I was asked to do that role, it was a bigger job. Yeah, it was a different role. It was in a different space to what I've been operating in. But I think hopefully I've demonstrated that it was an area that was interesting for me. So accept those new and challenging opportunities that force you to step outside your comfort zone. What can go wrong? Yeah? Maybe it can't be that bad. Next slide, please. Yeah, and also remember that there are a lot of people in the industry who have been in the industry a very long time and have a great deal of experience, have a great deal of understanding, have a great deal of knowledge. And in many ways, we have to respect that. But be brave, yeah. Don't be afraid to establish that viewpoint, provide some evidence, provide a point of view, and bring that new thinking, that innovation into what you're trying to do. So don't be scared. And last but not least, last quote. Yeah, be authentic. Yeah. Try to be something you're not. It's tiring, it's hard, it's not good for you. Yeah. So be authentic, be yourself. Have some fun. Yeah. I mentioned that it's a serious business working in the defence sector, but try and have some fun as you're doing that. But always try to be authentic, do what's right for you. Yeah. And don't just try and do something that's not right for you. So hopefully, quick spin through kind of what I do, where I've come from, how I've got here, what I'm doing now, and a little bit of insight into some of the quotes that kind of help me operate on a day-to-day basis. And I'm happy to take questions and discuss that later.
Thank you so much, Phil. I think what you said about being half a page ahead is so important, and it really resonated. Yes, please feel free to put questions in the chat box. We will pick them up right after the next presentation. Thanks again, Phil. Can I please introduce Marissa and Steve?
Thanks, Demi. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. So my name is Marcia Branken, and I'm a portfolio director at Mastec. Thank you for your time today and for attending this event. So today, together with my lovely colleague Steve Latcham, we will cover three main topics we hope you will find interesting. So firstly, I will talk to you a little bit about the DDAT framework and what that means for your career decisions. And to give that colour, I will talk just a little bit about some of Mastec's engagements with the Ministry of Defence, with the focus on the technologies and the methodologies that you may find interesting. Steve will then talk to you about some of the super cool use cases from his time inside the MOD, and he will then follow that on with a couple of minutes on the support that will be available to you should you choose defence as a career choice for you. And then back to me for just some final thoughts before handing it back to Nimi for the Q&A. So yes, let's go. So first slide. What is DDAT? DDAT stands for Digital Data and Technology. DDAT is a capability framework and works across a number of roles to ensure that the government is effective and efficient in meeting user needs. So remember user needs, we'll come back to that in a little bit. As a capability framework, DDAT provides a common definition, or language if you will, of over 40 digital data and technology job roles and career paths across the government. This applies to both the internal tech departments as well as through the supply chain. So service providers like Mastec and DXC needs to be aligned with this DDAT framework. The roles in the framework spans over all of the agile stuff, from architecting the solution to managing live services, to developing and engineering through scrum mastering of the tasks and activities, and even the cool stuff like user experience design with MacBooks, drawing lots of pretty pictures about what systems and services could integrate effectively. So whether you're looking at a career in the industry or inside the MOD, I absolutely recommend a thorough nosing about the DDAT website, which is displayed on the screen. What then about Mastec? So we work in two modes in the MOD. Some instances we deliver a complete service, and in the other instances we form part of rainbow teams. So a rainbow team is where there are team members, for example, from the civil service working alongside military personnel, working alongside one or more suppliers, creating a multidisciplinary team of DDAT capabilities to solve a user problem. So in Army Digital Services, we do some application support services where we develop and maintain applications used by over 300,000 users. The methodologies are Scrum and Kanban, and the technologies used are C#.NET, React.js, PHP, SQL Server, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics CRM, Linux and Windows, Business Objects, and Remedy. We also maintain and enhance the Army Data Warehouse. This is a warehouse that acts as a repository of personnel data for the military and Crown servants for the MOD. Methodology is Kanban, and technologies used are Oracle Database, OBIEE, and Remedy. Within Defence Digital, we are creating an IDAM service where IDAM stands for Identity and Access Management, and this service will be used across all of Defence. Methodologies used are SAFe and DevOps, and technologies used are NetIQ, Java, AngularJS, JavaScript, Ansible, and Terraform. Finally, the UK Hydrographic Office is a world-leading centre specialising in marine geospatial data that helps others to unlock the deeper understanding of the world's oceans. There we do application development, API development, and Azure Data Cloud development. So methodology is Scrum, and technologies used are C#.NET, Microsoft Azure, Azure DevOps, and GIS. So that is a whistle-stop tour of DDAS and a little taster of Mastec's involvement in defence. So let's now look at some of these cool use cases with Steve. Over to you, Steve.
Hey, thank you. Just to give a little bit of context, I've been with Mastec a year, and for the 5 years before that, I was actually in the civil service in Corsham with the Ministry of Defence, Defence Digital. And I was a functional leader for development engineering and architecture, and also helped to start driving into agile ways of working and digital services. Arrived in January 2015 to sit in front of a desktop computer. If you don't know what one of those is, ask your grandparents, using Windows XP, which you may also need to ask your grandparents because it's fully nearly 20 years old next year. Over the 5 years I was there, we shifted to MacBooks, iPads, iPhones, and Windows 10, which you will recognise hopefully. So Defence is actually on a transformative digital exploitation journey, and supplying to Defence and working within Defence, there is the most fascinating set of journeys and use cases you can possibly imagine. 250,000 users across the military services, civil servant and contractor or supplier support. It's the largest Office or Microsoft 365 instantiation in Europe. And in Defence, you work at official, which is government official business, but all the way up to top secret. So rooms with safe doors that you walk into without any form of devices, so no mobile phones, no smart watches, effectively nothing electronic, to talk about secret stuff, and compartmentalized and secure environments where the interaction of protecting our sovereign national interests takes place. But it's not just the fact that there is secret stuff that occurs, it's also the diversity of engaging with Defence. The military police within MAD effectively are as large as a local police authority, and they do criminal investigation and policing, and generally protecting and looking after our military forces, but also the individual bases and centres. You have thousands of doctors, nurses, medics, field hospitals, ambulances, and all of the paraphernalia of the National Health Service inside Defence. And then you have the kind of cool stuff where things that float, things that go underwater, things that fly, and land-based platforms, autonomous sometimes, with drones, with satellite communication and advanced geospatial or mapping capabilities. You genuinely have an entire business within a business within a business with a fascinating use case. At MOD, I was really fortunate to be able to be in the architecture function during one of my postings. And in the morning, I would be evaluating a battle space mapping solution, looking at what's flying, what's moving on the ground, and what's in the operational battle space that is friend or foe. Then by lunchtime, I'd be looking at a missile control and targeting solution. Then in the afternoon, we'd look at how do you claim your expenses in the HR and administration system. And then by early evening, we'd be evaluating a 11-ton reinforced tractor that's used to shift earth, but also identify and protect against improvised explosive devices. So defence is genuinely a fascinating set of use cases and capabilities. And unlike when I started there supplying for 10 years and then the 5 years from 2015 to 2020, they actually use contemporary technology now. It isn't the aged stuff of the past. And Mimi, if you can just move on to the next slide, please, that would be lovely. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the journey in defence supply chain and within the civil service, in that genuinely the civil service and the defence suppliers, because they provide to MOD, have some of the most amazing capabilities to assist you in your career. So the focus and mandate on neural gender diversity and background and ethnical diversity, inclusiveness at the forefront of all of the collaborations and thinking. Huge investment, Mastech and many defence suppliers alongside the civil service and the military in training programmes and career paths. Digital data and technology takes you all the way from an initial apprentice or graduate to a senior civil servant in competencies like architecture, development, engineering, service design, etc. And there's a plethora of either online-based learning and training courses available against those career paths, and the ability to hop between the tube lines, if you like, that are defined for those career paths. So how do you progress and earn more and more cash as you progress your career in the different competencies? Unlike the hierarchical, meeting-centric 300-page briefing documents of the past, defence has adopted and is adopting hugely agile and digital transformation tooling from Teams and Zoom and WebEx and Jira and Confluence, Ideas Board, etc., etc. So there is actually, partially because of the pandemic over the last year or so, but genuinely a transition to virtual environment and collaboration and agile processes, and military, civilian and supplier and other government agencies join together in the rainbow teams that Marcia has described, genuinely collaborating without hierarchy or rank on an outcome towards driving the digital and digital services agenda. And I think that's us.
Thanks, Steve. So I was just going to do a couple of final thoughts. Just
please.
If you remember nothing, but remember this from today, is that, and I hope what Steve said about the use cases will put some bones around this, because it's about the user experience, it's about the user needs. So if you remember nothing, just remember that. But regardless of your tools and your platforms and your languages, methodologies, continuous integrations, job titles, career paths, all of that, ultimately what matters is user needs. Putting your end user into the middle of what you are doing is a key principle, and that's how Agile works. So always think of your user needs first, and then work backwards to what tools and resources you will need to solve the problem. And remember to show and tell often, experiment and test with your users, and in this way you will have the comfort that you're on the right track. So that's it from me, and from Steve. Thank you very much. Back to you, Nimi. You're on mute, Nimi.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that. It took me a while to click on the button. Thank you very much, both. I thought that was really interesting. And Steve, I need to hear more about what battle space mapping is, because I can't even imagine what that is. I'm going to have to do a quick Google after. From the group, does anybody have any questions for our panelists? And if you do have a question, please do mention your name, your organisation as well.
Hi there, Nimi. It's Emma Lacey here from Oracle. So firstly, I just want to say thank you to all the speakers. It's been an absolutely brilliant session, and I hope everyone who's joined as well has got a lot out of it. I've actually worked with Nimi for a few years now. I was one of the founding committee members of this network. So it's great to see that we can do something virtual during these times. So yeah, as I say, lots of great content, and it's obviously technology is so central to what a lot of our customers do, and how we can help them be and secure their data. I guess my question really around kind of user experience and being customer centric would be how we can, in all of our roles, I guess, be that kind of one step ahead, like Phil was saying, and whether that is when you're customer facing or even, you know, researching and being one step ahead on everything that's going on at the moment in the world, and what your best advice would be for those on the call really to do that.
Do you want me to go first? Right, so Emma, I would say you need to think who your end user is. I think often when we work in agile squads and you've got your product owner and you've got your proxy product owner and you've got your people inside you, think who is the actual end user that's going to use whatever it is that you were engineering. Don't ever forget who that is, because that might change your perception. So it's not just being customer centric, but it's being end user centric.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. The other thing I would say is keep it as simple as you can do. I think a lot of people in the industry have a tendency to make things too complex. And once you make things too complex, there's more things to go wrong. Now, it's not easy when you're dealing with the range of services that we're delivering to the Ministry of Defence that I talked about and Steve talked about, because you've got a user sat in an office, yeah, scenario one, and you've got a user sat in a battlefield scenario, and that battlefield scenario actually in the last year could have been described as a Nightingale hospital as an example. Yeah? But keep it as simple as possible. Minimize the amount of things that that can break. I think one of the messages that we hear a lot from the CIO of the Ministry of Defence is do the basics well. Yeah, because if you turn up, a really simple case as a user with a laptop, if you switch your laptop on and you can connect to Teams and you can join a call, that's success. Yeah. As soon as that starts to fail for whatever reason, that becomes a real inhibitor to actually doing the basics. So that's my advice, keep it simple.
Thank you, that's really clear. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that question as well, Emma. We've got another question that's come into me privately via the chat. How do you work collaboratively with your teams on such interesting subjects? So especially kind of the difficult subjects that we've been talking about today.
It's a really good question. I think there's two levels to it. For government official communication, actually, there are all of the usual cloud services available. So you can utilize Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx. Then effectively share screens, look at shared PowerPoint or even virtual whiteboards. But what we have noticed particularly is that in a virtual environment, it's actually very good to be a little bit more social. So recognizing what's in people's rooms and what interesting pictures they have behind them, and when the pets interrupt, turning that into a bit more of a social dialogue, because the temptation is it's quite clinical in a virtual environment. So you need to introduce that social aspect. And what you also need to do is ensure that you call out each participant in the room, because it's very easy to hide coming off camera and mute and be forgotten about, but have the most important point. And then when you look at effectively higher classifications, there are environments, albeit using specialized secured equipment, that will enable you to do similar kinds of collaboration, just slightly more hardened, slightly more location centric, so you sometimes have to be in particular places. But don't forget that the key to any great collaboration is every voice is heard, ensuring that input is there, and ensuring that everyone understands what outcome you're looking to achieve. And in defence, we tend to call that the mission. And what I love about defence as a business is that actually the mission is always really well understood. So you absolutely always know what the outcome needs to be.
If we look back only a year, we need to go back a year and a couple of days, actually. I think the majority of work with defence organisations was done in the office, face to face. It's significant was done. So clearly there has been a massive change in the last 12 months to how these kind of technologies, whether it be Zoom or Teams, have had to be adopted. And I think that's accelerated the change in some of these more secure environments. What's going to happen next? I'm not exactly sure, because I think in some instances, this way of working will continue to be effective. As I said, I joined our mod account middle of last year. I've not met a single person face to face yet. Now, I think I'm being pretty effective, but maybe someone would tell me different. But so it would be quite nice to meet some people face to face, but I think that is a fundamental shift in how we're going to operate. And then, as Steve mentioned, as you get up the security levels, it becomes harder. It becomes harder. And in some instances, that has to be done in face-to-face rooms, where people have the right levels of security accreditation. And I just go back to what I talked about before about what we do is serious. I think you will, working in this industry, have access to data that is at various different protected levels. And it's important that when working in a remote scenario, we treat that data in the same way we would if we were in a secure office. So a few points there on that one, Mimi.
It's always quite, sorry, Mimi. Now, I was just going to say, it's always quite cool to tell your friends that you'd love to tell them what you do for a living, but you'd have to get them killed afterwards. It's all good.
I was just going to add, just build on that, what Steve and Paul said, was that you just have to remember to do the one team approach. You have to, if you're in a rainbow team, if you are working alongside civil servants and other customers, other suppliers, you leave your badge at the door and you bring only yourself, and you have to work to the goal of the team, not to the goal of your organization or any other motive. It has to be the one goal for the team.
Thank you. I think those are some really interesting points. We have another question. What role do you think cybersecurity plays when it comes to defence, and how do you see this evolving?
So let's start with how I see it evolving. I think you don't need to look in the integrated review and the defence command paper to see big sections written about this particular area. The threat, people talk about the threat changing, and the kind of, I guess, the cyber threat that is coming from, I guess, rogue nations is the language that's used sometimes. And I've worked in places before where we've been well aware of some of those rogue nations trying to get access to data in a very aggressive way. And I think we in this country need more capability in that space, because we need to do more in terms of how we respond. Now, I think there is some good words in the output from the government last week that talks about growing that capability. Particularly, I think they talk about growing that capability in the north of England, and I think along a line that you might draw from kind of Liverpool across to Hull. And living in Chester, I feel quite lucky to be kind of quite close to that line. And I think there's going to be a need for people both to work in that space who understand the tools that are used to protect systems, understand the techniques that are used by the threat, to try and infiltrate systems, and that's both kind of technology and behaviors. Yeah? And then really try and understand how we kind of respond with those tools and techniques to that threat. So I think it's a real growth area in the IT industry going forwards, and an area of real interest. Yeah, it is an interesting area. It's not nice to be attacked. It creates for a challenging bit of work, trying to work out who's attacking you, why they're attacking you, and how to stop them attacking you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, just to complement what Phil was saying, it is a really big part of the investments in the integrated review, part of ongoing investments across Ministry of Defence, and it's a career path, perhaps for the first time. So competencies in cybersecurity, accreditation, security architecture, etc., are there in both the defence industry organisations and in the MOD itself. I think the other aspect is just metaphorically, 20 years ago, the concept of defence was the barbed wire fence and the armed guards around the perimeter of the base or the headquarters. Actually, that perimeter, although still there, is now virtual in cyberspace. So compartmentalizing, protecting, and understanding what threats there are to sovereign interests and to protecting our information and our people is pivotal, because there are no barbed wire fences and armed guards that can protect you in cyberspace. So whether it's private sector or defence or financial services or retail, everyone needs to look at cybersecurity as a pivotal objective in business.
Thank you. Marcia, we've got a question here. Are there any job opportunities at Mastech?
Yeah, loads. Go have a look at the website.
We'll definitely put it in the chat, and as a follow-up email to all the attendees, we'll have some links, won't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
We've also got another question about how you see defence policy evolving to leverage technology innovation faster and reduce the reliance on legacy tech. Steve, this might be a question for you.
Okay, that's a really interesting one. So if you have a little Google on search on gov.uk for the new procurement strategy, that is a consultation that came out in December. It's quite a sometimes dull, but sometimes quite interesting document of 60 or 70 pages. But what it does effectively say is that the government actually recognises, including defence, that its approval process and its funding models are a bit too slow. It doesn't engage companies quickly enough in shaping their requirements, and it doesn't really have that many models for innovating with new technology. The other thing that actually came out this week, which is worth a look, is the Defence and Security Industrial Strategy, D&SIS, if you have a search for that. And many of these are actually in techUK's website as well. If you browse their opinion groups, there's some artifacts there. And that also talks about driving a digital backbone as we go forward. So contemporary technology to support defence and to support its innovation and exploitation of information. So policy actually will become more of a responsive and real-time thing, because technology has become more of a responsive and real-time thing. And the D&S industrial strategy does talk a lot about that. And there's some really good quotes and some really good programs to check out.
I mentioned the digital backbone before, which is kind of a core component of the, I guess, the strategy that the Defence Digital are driving forwards. That provides a capability that then needs to be exploited, yeah. Whether that's through apps development or whether it's through, I guess, other kind of innovations. And there's some really big programs that require that innovation. So the Tempest program gets called out quite a lot at the moment. That is the UK's response in the airspace. Yeah, what is that? It's a new future combat aircraft fighter. what does it need? It needs to be designed and built by a consortium of partners. Does it exist today? No, it exists in a prototype form. Yeah. What do they need to do? Well, one, they need to build it using kind of technology, using digital twin type thinking and high performance compute to model it, so that one, they can work out how to build it. Secondly, to test it. So using technology to drive the design and build of that next generation fighter. That really isn't something that's been done significantly before. CAD/CAM has been around for a long time, but I think this really takes that to another level of how to use the tech to design and build that capability. And that's just one example. I think artificial intelligence and machine learning, I think, are also really key areas that need a lot of capability, really, to work out how those things can help make decisions based on the data. Yeah, not replace the people, but supplement people with machine learning to help inform decisions going forward.
That's actually brilliant, Phil, because the next question I've got is all about data and how much growth area there is within defence and security.
If I just went with lots, would that be too simple an answer to that question?
Yeah, I think, do you know what, completely with Phil. So in defence and security, the concept of a chief data officer has emerged in the last 12 months. So Caroline Bellamy is the 2-star chief data officer in Charlie Forte's defence digital organisation. There's a Defence Information and Exploitation Steering Committee that's actually chaired by 4-star. So for 4-star, read very, very senior folks inside MOD. So from the very top of the shop, exploitation of data and information is at the forefront. It was often said information is the lifeblood of defence in many of the strategy documents over the last few years. Going virtual and moving out from the perimeter, barbed wire perimetered offices, information and insight during the pandemic and during operations is ever more important. So a career in data, information, analytics, data architecture is absolutely at the forefront of what defence needs to get done.
I'm aware of an example. I worked on an opportunity when I was at Rolls-Royce on Project Nelson, which is the Royal Navy's response to that data challenge. So I mean, you just need to Google Project Nelson and that'll take you, you'll find a link to the program of that. Again, working with partners, that was about how did the Navy better exploit data? How could Rolls-Royce, through their data, help the Navy? I think also working with Rolls-Royce, I did quite a lot of work with their R² Data Labs function, where they were really trying to understand how they can use the data to support how to improve their aerospace engines. If you look at what they did this time last year, they opened up that capability to kind of lead on data analysis of what was going on in the pandemic to try and understand what we should do differently to prepare for future pandemics. So again, opportunity there. And data, the data platforms forms a key part of that digital backbone that I mentioned earlier. And I mean, I'd like to think that question came from someone at Oracle, because Oracle always keen to tell a data story.
It could be, it could be. There were lots more questions on kind of the cybersecurity element of the work that you do. I was just wondering if anyone had any other examples that they'd like to share with the group about the work that they've previously done. Nope.
Hi, it's Bilal. Actually, the data question came from me. I work in BPP. I'm actually transitioning my career into technology, and I had this opportunity to do apprenticeship in data analysis. So I'm quite enjoying it at the moment. So yeah, it's good to see that there's lots of opportunities.
In DXC, one of the things that my boss has done recently is work with the apprenticeship program, because through the apprenticeship program you can reskill people in your organisation, and they're working through a data fellowship program at the moment, and that's been a number of my peers are working through that data fellowship program with some of our early career workers as well, to try and better position them to understand how to model data, how to consume data, how to exploit data. So I think it's a really interesting area.
Thank you, Bilal, for that. Does anybody else want to come in and share their story? Unfortunately, because we've had such a long Q&A, we won't have time for the breakouts. So this would be a really good place to just talk a little bit more about the work that you've been doing. If not, I have more questions for the panel coming in. Another question for the panel is, how does defence policy affect the work that you do? Is it a top level, is it a top level sort of assignments, or does it trickle down?
I'd say there's a few ways. Clearly, our response as DXC to government policy is done at a policy level, and we have a government affairs person who's responsible for kind of making sure that at the highest level in our organisation we understand what we can and should be doing to support public sector, and including Ministry of Defence. I think then it lands with us at all levels through the organisation then, as different parts of the organisation respond to that policy, as different parts of the organisation do something that supports that. Yeah? So I mentioned the government's announcement on Tempest as an example. Yeah, really big policy announcement about the future of our combat air. Now, how do I see that evidence itself in DXC on a day-to-day basis now? Well, I see it through opportunities in MOD, opportunities that we have to do stuff with BAE, with Rolls-Royce, to Leonardo, to MBA, to all the different people that are playing a role in that, all have their own little, I say little, still big components, but components of that to do, where actually they need our help to do that. And then the third, I think, is as the policy cascades down into real initiatives, we get engaged in those real initiatives. That might be as simple as a change request into the organisation to do something, to reconfigure a component that enables something different to work. An example of that, Steve referred back earlier to when he landed in MOD, they had desktop computers, yeah? Well, now they have virtual desktops, okay? Quite a long way. Well, actually, enabling a virtual desktop requires a configuration change in some underlying systems to make that work, yeah? Which in one way is a very simple technical change, but roll that right back up, that's around policy and about making the IT easier to consume by end users. Those would be my 3 points on that.
I think just to complement Phil's statements, actually, some of the policy within defence and government has created some of the most advantageous things. So digital data and technology, which Marcia described, DDAT, that's a government policy in terms of how to drive digital skills and career progression in a consistent way across government. You then have all the obvious security accreditation, compliance, standards that you need to align to, and actually applying a retail or consumer technology model to the defence use cases is quite interesting, and not something that's been an opportunity in the past, but actually with the prevalence of digital technology is emerging more and more and more. Who would have thought that someone on an iPad is looking at a battle space map of all of the tanks and the ground vehicles and the drones flying over and the satellite communication areas. All of a sudden, actually, retail technology applies in a military context and can be exploited.
That's a really interesting angle that we haven't really explored so much in today's session. But I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers and the panel for providing really good insights into an area that I personally didn't know a lot about. So I hope everyone got a lot out of it. And thank you everyone for joining as well. I've just put a link in the chat of our LinkedIn group if you'd like to stay connected. Please do connect via LinkedIn, and do feel free to bother the panelists via LinkedIn as well, if that's okay with them. I'll be sending, yeah, great. I'll be sending around the recording, which will just have kind of the initial presentations on it. So if you have colleagues that would like to catch up on their own time, they can do so then. I'm going to give you back 2 minutes of your time so you can get a coffee before your next meeting, but I really appreciate everyone joining today. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Fantastic. Have a great day. Thank you. Really appreciate it.